Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Nabs Effect podcast. I am your host, Naveen Ganglan. Yes, two episodes, two straight days. I can't remember the last time I did something like that. Maybe the start of the podcast a few years ago, but it's been a while. However, there is a good reason for doing this. Last night, in case you guys missed it, we spoke to Nick Caballero of the UST Growling Tigers, got his thoughts about UST making it to the final four of the UAP men's basketball tournament for the first time in 5 years. But today we shift to Gilas-Pilipinas mode. We shift to FIBA. And who better to speak FIBA hoops with than someone who broadcasts game for FIBA and also loves Philippine basketball himself? Josh Bett will join us. He is a popular friend of this podcast. We've had him on a few times before, and I'm pretty certain that a lot of people are once again looking forward to hear his thoughts as we get to the week where Gilas will play host in the FIBA Asia qualifiers against New Zealand and Hong Kong. That's happening this week. We're going to talk about that. But first, a quick word from a friend of the show, Finn Cotton.
I want to say congratulations on all your success.
Congrats to Finn Cotton Sneaker.
Para sa lahat ng mga kababayan natin dyan, Disenyong Pinoy.
Disenyo ng Pinoy para sa Pinoy. Dinisenyo ng Pinoy para sa Pinoy.
Dinisenyo ng Pinoy para sa Pinoy.
Disenyong Pinoy para sa mga Pinoy.
One of the best seller nila sa Fin Cotton, napaka-quality.
Napakasarap po sa paa. Halos parang natutulog lang yung mga hinlalaki ko sa paa. The best. Fin Cotton is the best policy. Nobody's perfect.
Okay, we have Josh Bett here with us. Josh, of course, broadcast game for FIBA. He is an avid, not really supporter, but shall we say aficionado of the Philippine men's national basketball team and Filipino culture in general. Just ask him about how much he loves Jollibee Chicken Joy. Josh, welcome back. It's been a while. The last time I had you on this podcast, you weren't babysitting just yet. You were still sleeping more hours per night. But before we get into the basketball, how's life been like for you the last few months since becoming a father?
Well, I think you got my text message at 2:30 a.m. So that was my first duty.
I know.
She woke up again at 5 a.m. and then I managed to watch, I think, 3 different games last night. So that is life. Let me tell you, it's tiring, but the most rewarding and beautiful experience of my life to be a father.
Has your baby uttered? It's a girl, right? You're a girl dad?
Oh, yeah. Janelle, her name's Janelle Ming Tu. So she takes her grandmother's name, a Vietnamese, for her middle name. And then my last name, Bett. So, yeah.
So, has she uttered her first word yet or not yet?
No. She's only a month and 2 days old yet. She screams when she wants milk and formula, but that's about it.
Of course. Well, it's great to hear that you're finding the whole process rewarding. Well, one of the things the Philippines will find rewarding is if they watch their national team play in impressive fashion in their upcoming games against New Zealand, a new continental rival. It's a pretty young rivalry, not even a rivalry, because honestly, New Zealand has absolutely kicked their asses the last few times Philippines has faced them. And them plus Australia, they're going to be a new hurdle the Philippine team will have to get over when it comes to succeeding in the international stage because of the continental proximity. And Hong Kong, which the Philippines actually beat pretty resoundingly just a few months ago. So why don't you remind everyone first, Josh, how important these two games are for the Philippines? They won their first two against Chinese Taipei and Hong Kong back in February. But why is it important to get at least one game in these next two games, maybe even both?
Well, one win, I believe, against Hong Kong would more or less solidify qualifying for the Asia Cup. Because remember, it's the top 3 teams that go through. The bottom team will not go through. Look, we anticipate there'll be a victory against Hong Kong. We did see in the first game just how dominant Gilas can be. When you have the likes of Soto and Brownlee, it makes it very tough for teams to try and compete with them, not only in the low block, but also, the style of the triangle offense that Coach TC wants to play, that, not many teams are going to be able to go against them. But look, Nabs, let's cut to the chase here. The big one, the big fish, the big silver tuna, as they would like to say, is New Zealand. This is it's a rivalry based on basketball supremacy. New Zealand, I think the first time they met Gilas in an international game was, maybe it was 2016, I believe it was, at the Olympic qualifiers in Manila. And it's respectful to say that New Zealand, although they don't necessarily have the individual players that most basketball fans will look out for in terms of players who play in the NBA, and that's no disrespect to any of those players, they're a very, very good basketball team. And I think what they have as well that most very good federations have is a plethora of players that they can throw into these qualifiers. If you look at some of these players, Dan Fotu, for example, the younger brother of Isaac Fotu, they have the benefit, as do the Philippines, as do Japan or Korea, of choosing who they want to put into these qualifying games. So this will be possibly the most interesting game for me personally in the qualifiers.
Absolutely. Now, we have a columnist on our website, All Star Magazine, Simon Redoblado, who wrote this in a column he came out with today, where basically the last few times the Tall Blacks have taken on Gilas-Pilipinas, New Zealand has won by an average margin of 29.3 points. So in terms of the competition, it hasn't been particularly close, like we mentioned earlier. However, he did mention something. The Tall Blacks do not have a significant size advantage over Gilas. When you look at the Gilas pool, Philippines has a couple of big men they could use to really maybe even the scales in the front court. And in fact, correct me if I'm wrong, but the front court of New Zealand is relatively young. They're not as experienced in international play as some of the other players like the backcourt or the wing players. And New Zealand will be led by a new head coach who ironically was coached by Tab Baldwin back in 2020, 2002, Jude Flavel, who is taking over the New Zealand basketball team. And some might say because he is a relatively new coach, because it's a mix and match of new players, because it's a new system being integrated. Maybe New Zealand is a little rusty and not exactly in tip top shape just yet. And that would open the door for the Philippines to potentially score an upset. How do you feel about that, Josh? Do you think because of the youth of the front court of New Zealand and also some of the inexperience with the new system and new head coach, there might be an opening there for the Philippines to win, particularly because the Philippines actually played pretty well in the OQT in Latvia a few months ago?
Yeah, I mean, look, first of all, I think this is Gilas's game to really go and show that, they mean business, as they did at the FIBA OQT. I think keeping the same core of players together is imperative. Coach Tim Cohen's obviously, he's solidified a very good squad of players from the PBA, players who've come from the UAP, as we've seen as well as the players who play abroad in the KBL and the B League. But going back to New Zealand, I don't think the coaching change will have that much of a hindrance on their play, because if you closely follow New Zealand basketball, everybody who comes into the system, from the days of when Tab Baldwin was coaching and, got them to the semifinals of the 2002 FIBA World Cup, as well as the 2006 World Championship, where they still played a relatively good performance. Any new coach that comes in has already been a part of the system, whether they've been a consultant, an assistant coach, or a trainer in any way. And if you look at this young team, there's a lot of familiar names that played at the FIBA Asia Cup in Indonesia. So the continuity is there. I couldn't tell you who's going to win this game. This is going to be very, very interesting. I think the concerning part for me was that Koshigaya game that Kai Soto played in, where he went down. I think it was with the ankle or the head concussion that he went. So,
Exactly.
But I've read that
he's been cleared. Yeah, exactly.
Which I think is big. My thing is it's I think Brownlee needs a lot of rest coming into this one. You got to remember, last summer, I don't know how Justin Brownlee does what he does. This man,
at 37 years old, it's crazy.
At 37 years old, it's incredible. This man goes from me being with him in Dubai at the Basketball Champions League Asia, to then him going and playing at the FIBA OQT, to then me being with him again in Indonesia covering the IBL finals, to then afterwards going straight playing in the PBA. So I think hopefully he's rested up. I know obviously it was quite devastating for him personally and Ginebra to lose to TNT Trop and Giga. But I think whatever respite he can get is so important because as we saw at the FIBA OQT, every player has a pivotal role to play around the likes of JB, around the likes of Kai Soto. And you're going to need big performances from the players who, they'll need to carry their own in this game. And I'll expect they'll do that. The likes of Dwight Ramos, Newsom as well, who impressed me a lot at the OQT. Again, it's in the Philippines. If there's one thing I'll definitely say is that atmosphere at the MOA is going to be electrifying. And no doubt that's going to have a big impact on the game for sure.
Would you say that kind of atmosphere is something the New Zealand players aren't used to? I'm not so familiar with New Zealand basketball, so do they not get the same kind of reception from the crowd?
Those players, look, some of those players have played NCAA basketball. They've played in quite intense crowds. Some of them have played in Europe. So again, if you play in Europe, trust me, and I'd say to anybody watching the stream, if you ever come to Europe, go to Turkey, go to Serbia, go to Greece, and I mean this in a good way because I love hopping on a plane and going to those countries. It's a good way to say welcome to hell. I mean, you go to arenas where, say, it's the Greek derby, Olympiacos, Panathinaikos, or the Serbian derby in Belgrade between Red Star and Partizan. That you can't have visiting fans. You cannot have visiting supporters because of health and safety or just trying to manage crowd control. So those players, some of them have played in those kind of environments. And look, what I love about the MOA is, now I didn't see Gilas play in the MOA. I saw Gilas play and I commented them live at
Araneta.
Yeah, that's where I met you in the press conference. Is that the thing what Gilas can do is maybe it doesn't have the same ferocity of a European atmosphere, but my goodness gracious, the volume levels when Gilas go on a run, Philippine fans, they have their very own brand of a very intense atmosphere. And all I can say to all the Gilas fans, if you bring that energy to the arena, you're going to make it a great atmosphere for yourself. But, if anything, you become that sixth player on the court.
Here are some names to watch out for when it comes to New Zealand. Corey Webster, Isaiah Leafa, who are two dead-eye shooters. And the same could probably be said for the likes of Flynn Cameron, Taylor Britt, and Walter Brown. Like we mentioned earlier, a young frontline for New Zealand, Sam Menega, Sam Wardenberg, and Tyrell Harrison. However, from the names of the wing players I mentioned, like Webster and such, is there someone there that if you're able to limit him or contain him, you might be able to slow the team down? Or is New Zealand more of a squad that you might be able to stop one or two big names, but the other guys can hurt you just as much?
Well, it's the beauty of a team like New Zealand because then you got to look at the likes of Dan Fotu and Russ Batch as well, who were their big performers in the last window, along with Samuel Timmis. Is that what I've always noticed? The first time I ever saw the Kiwis play was when I was working in China back in the summer 2014 when they were preparing to go to Spain for the FIBA World Cup. And I remember I was courtside. They were playing. I can't remember if they weren't. They were playing the Guangdong Southern Tigers. At that time, they were the best team in China. And I was sitting with, at that time I was working for an American basketball company coaching. And all the guys I was working with, they didn't know much about Kiwi basketball. And the Kiwis didn't exactly, play well in that game in terms of getting, hitting open shots. But the thing about New Zealand basketball is they're very technical. They're very systematic. They're very meticulous in how they defend, how they execute their offenses. They will push very quickly off a turnover or, off a defensive rebound or even if they're scored on. But the thing that I've noticed about them is they are very calculated in how they try to attack you. If they want to go quick into the fast break, they will. If they won't, they'll pull it out. They get into a very organized set. So to go back to your question, is there any one player? It's very tough because any player on a given night can be the X factor for the Kiwis. So it's one of those where Gilas, you have to be on guard at all time against a team like this. And I think they can be. Listen, with a dominant scorer like Justin Brownlee, if the Kiwis are going into this game thinking, okay, we're going to shut down Brownlee, I think this is what Latvia did. We'll try and make life difficult for him. Well, then you have to remember you've also got the likes of Dwight Ramos, Chris Newsom, Kai Soto, depending maybe Jumar Fajardo if he's going to line a suit up or not. I haven't looked at the lineup. So what's big about Gilas is this is no longer a one-player team. As we saw in the World Cup, respectfully, which was happening all the time with Jordan Clarkson, or as we saw in previous Asia Cups and World Cups with Andre Blatch. This is a team now, Gilas, where they're now on the forefront of saying, listen, we have other players that you're going to have to make sure you go on the scouting report with. So I would say this is a very evenly matched up game coming in.
That would be very interesting. Imagine a close game down the wire because if it ends up being even, like you mentioned, and it's a few possessions here and there that decide the game late in the fourth period, you factor that Philippines home crowd and you think that's probably going to be very helpful to the Philippines' cause. Now, the Philippines will have the option of playing Justin Brownlee in the naturalized spot or Ange Kwame. They can even alternate that in the New Zealand game and the Hong Kong game. Personally, I would go with Brownlee against New Zealand. I feel like that versatility and that ability, particularly when the offense breaks down and you need something out of nothing, Brownlee is immaculate in those kind of situations. But against Hong Kong, where, with all due respect to the visiting team, I think Gila should blow them out again. I might be interested to see Ange Kwame get some run over there, especially if AJ Edu, because of his knee injury, isn't recovered in time. You could use the extra big man, and like I said, Hong Kong's not a superior opponent. You might be able to work on seeing what Ange can probably give you. How do you feel about that? Do you think Brownlee should play both games, or do you want to split them?
No, I agree with you. I think it's probably because listen, I don't know what Brownlee's next move is. Is he preparing to go back and play for Paleta Jaya? But I think regardless, that would make more sense. Given the impact that he's had with this Gilas team, in the last 2-3 years or 2 years, however long he's been playing for them, I think it's probably more suitable, as you mentioned, for him to go against the New Zealand game. Because listen, that's a game. If you win, it more or less would cement your position, not right then and there, but to maybe look at the Hong Kong game and think we could probably finish top of the group here. But to rest him for the Hong Kong game, yeah, I would think that would be a wise idea to bring in Ange. I mean, Ange, I think he spent the last. Listen, I've been able to catch up with the PBA as much as I should have done, but was he playing for Morocco only in the ASL? Was he with Morocco?
Only the ESL. He
Yeah.
wasn't playing in the last
Okay,
Governors
so
Cup conference.
then and there, listen, he's probably. Look, I bumped into him in the summer. I think he's quite eager to play for the national team as well. And look, we've seen what he's like when he does play for Gilas. He does provide that sort of insurance policy as a rim protector in the paint, and I think it'd be good for them. The only thing is if he was to play in the New Zealand game, again, Gilas would have a problem at that power forward spot. And Nav, you'll remember this in 2023, just after I commentated Philippines versus Lebanon. And that was my first time commentating Brownlee and seeing the impact he had as a power forward for that team. I was very bold in saying I think Brownlee should actually go to the World Cup instead of Clarkson because the power forward position is something they'll desperately need to cover. They have enough guards, they have enough slashers and shooters on the perimeter that can help them out. And I remember
you're probably right.
But I mean, it's all opinion based at the end of the day. But the thing is, I remember getting butchered by that every week. Somebody was like tagging me in some news posts or whatever. Not just Filipino people; it was European journalists telling me, "Oh, you don't know what you're talking about." And respectfully, that's fine. But then come the OQT, you can just see how important Brownlee is to this lineup. I mean, he is a go-to player. He's a scorer. He's a leader. And I could say any person that's played with Justin Brownlee absolutely loves him as a teammate. When you're that great on the court and you're that good for team morale, I would agree with what you're saying. Playing for New Zealand, resting for Hong Kong.
As great as the Jordan Clarkson performance was on that incredible game against China, I can't help but wonder maybe some of the other games like Dominican Republic where Clarkson struggled to shoot from the field, maybe Brownlee might have changed things just because of how he fit into the system once we saw that a few months later. But of course, that's woulda, coulda, shoulda. Hong Kong game, real quick. Is there any chance Hong Kong might pull out an upset here against the Philippines, or do you think it's a foregone conclusion that Gila should win this game?
It's funny you asked that because I'm trying to remember the last time we spoke. Because last time we spoke for the window, I think I'd flown to Canada the following right after that window to go see my parents, and then I went to Vietnam, and somewhere in between, someone sends me a viral video on YouTube, me as the picture criticizing me for saying something about the Hong Kong game, and I don't even remember what I said, but whatever was said in the YouTube video wasn't what I said in our interview. But listen, look, I think with Hong Kong basketball, they where they struggled against the Philippines, obviously, wasn't only size in the paint. They played a very much a 2-3 zone defense for the majority of the game. And I think Hong Kong basketball, without a player like Duncan Reed in the lineup, it does put too much pressure on the backcourt players to really score a plethora of points if you're going to struggle defensively. So look, I would in my respectful opinion, I would say Gilas should have this game won. But knowing Hong Kong, they will put up a fight. They'll press you to death. But you also have to compare respectfully where the players are playing. I think nearly to all the players for the Hong Kong national team are playing in the domestic league in Hong Kong, and you've got Gilas players that play PBA, B League, UAP, and I'm not sure if the KBL players are coming in. I mean, that would be like essentially me saying, could Great Britain hang with the Greek national team? Or could they hang with the Serbian national team? Yes, they've done it before, but could they beat them? That's another question. It's a big ask. And I would just say I believe respectfully the Philippines will win this one.
What other aspects of the Philippine team are you looking forward to watching? Are you eager to see how much more Kai Soto has improved? Because that was one of the key factors I noticed the last few times the Gilas team was in competition. Kai looked much better starting with that FIBA window in February. And I want to see how much more his post game has developed. He's had some pretty big statistical outputs in the B League the last few months, even if he just shifted teams. Of course, it was tough to see him have that concussion issue, which it seems like he's going to recover in time from. But what else are you looking forward to with his Philippine national team?
Wow, that's a very good question. Let's go back to Philippines versus Brazil in Latvia. And Gilas, they built like an 8 or 10 point lead going into the third quarter. I think it was something like they had the momentum. And this will be a very good test for a player like Kevin Kimball, right? Now, I'm not trying to say Kevin Kimball or Agut Japith were the sole reason that team lost, because those two, they did phenomenal in the build up to that game. Excuse me, sorry. But I think if you saw that game, Gilas were just flying on, so much wave of confidence, and they were playing great stuff. Chris Newsom had a very good game in that one. Brownlee started off slow, but you could see he was getting help from players such as Dwight, such as Juma, such as Newsom. And then coming to that third quarter, it's very small defensive errors, whether you're caught ball watching, whether you close out wrong, whether you're in the wrong position. So I am looking forward to see, and this would be my honest guess. I think in the first 2 quarters against New Zealand, Gilas are going to come out like guns a-blazing. They're going to come out so much confident. They're going to be in New Zealand's face. They're going to make some big shots. The Mo is going to get hyped up. It's in that point when Gilas has a, close to a double-digit lead, 9, 10, 11, whatever we want to call it, where that's where they're going to have to learn the lessons from the Brazil game. That's when you're going to have to realize, look, at some point, they're going to make a run. That's the old cliche about basketball. It's a game of runs. We need to make sure that we are in the right positions at all time. We're not getting caught ball watching. We're not going to get caught for any silly fouls. We're closing players out. We're rotating. We're switching. We're picking up. So that is, for me, having watched. Remember, I was in Spain commentating the OQT over there, so we were able to watch the games at the same time. So I'm looking forward to that test. If Gilas can overcome that test, that mental test, then I tell you what, this team can start to set a lot of expectations heading into Saudi Arabia this summer for the FIBA Asia Cup.
I like what you said about what Gilas will do in case they get off to an early lead and they potentially lose that lead. Because as Mike Tyson ironically said, everybody's got a plan until they get punched, which didn't exactly work out for him a few days ago. Anyway, before we let Josh go here, let's take a few questions from our viewers. First, from Enzo, are there players not currently in the Gilas pool you're hoping to eventually see play for the team someday?
Well, Belanga would be the obvious one. I've always been a big advocate that I felt that he should have gone to the FIBA Basketball World Cup instead of Scotty Thompson. Listen, I have the most respect for Scotty Thompson's game. I think he's a phenomenal player, and rightfully so. I think in the build-up to that World Cup, he was the PBA's most valuable player. And I think that individual accolade probably earned him the right to be there. I'm just looking at it from the stake that here you have a point guard who's just having, now in his second great season playing in the Korean Basketball League. Let's not forget, KBL, for many years since they first inaugurated in 1997 and the national team had won the FIBA Asia Cup against Japan, and I think it was in Saudi Arabia. It was 1997, I believe. That's in my mind always been one of the better leagues in East Asia, and maybe all of Asia for that matter. So I think to have a former Antonio player playing at such a high level and also, really making himself a very dominant point guard at that level, I would probably personally like to see him play. With AJ, yeah, I mean, you definitely need a banger inside. And I think AJ is, we saw at the World Cup. I mean, don't ask me, ask Karl Anthony Towns. It made him a better play at the international games. So, but it depends on AJ if he's healthy. I know he's had, a lot of recurring knee injuries over the years, but most likely I would like to see SJ back in the lineup.
Awesome. Another question here. Should Coach Tim Cohn consider bringing RJ Abarientos into the current Gilas pool? RJ, of course, played in the KBL, won Rookie of the Year, played in the B League, that didn't go so well, and just had a phenomenal first go with Barangay Ginebra in the PBA, making it to the finals. Had a huge Game 6. Unfortunately for Ginebra, they didn't win that game, but RJ showed out. Do you think Coach Tim should eventually bring in RJ?
It's tough because here's the thing that we've seen over the years, especially with Gilas, and you can go back to like the last decade when, Chuck Reyes, Tab Baldwin have been trying to. I mean, Tab was there in 2015 when they went to the Asia Cup in China. When back then you had Alapag, you had the Blur, Terrence Romeo. It's always been a case of too much to choose from, too many cooks in the kitchen. When you've got too many players at one position, and I'm not saying RJ Abarientos isn't good enough. I think he's a very talented player. I remember when he played for there was a team in the B League before he left. I remember I covered one of his games against Ruku Golden Kings, but I remember the game he played. You can definitely see the talent is there. I'm a little bit disappointed that he ended up leaving because I felt he could have been a top guard in the B League, but his time will come. And I think when you're in that situation where you're a player and there's many other great players around you that are being selected, at some point you just need to wait for an injury or a player's not available. Then you come into the lineup, you show, and it becomes about momentum. You've beaten that player with your performance and you hold on to that performance. So I'd say with RJ, just, again, be patient. Time will come. We all know he can definitely play at this level.
Awesome. I've always thought that when you make up a national team, let's say you have a roster of 12 players, you need, probably out of those 12, maybe you need like 8 star quality players who are alphas, essentially, right? Especially when you're going up against other elite players of other national teams. But those other 4 spots, I've always felt you need elite role players as well, because you might get all the superstars, but not all the superstars who are used to having the ball in their hands in their respective teams will have the ball in their hands when they compete with the national team. And that's why you plug and play elite role players, because unless the superstars are willing to be role players, but then that's why you get elite role players, because sometimes you just need a 3-and-D guy, someone who's going to play defense and knock down corner 3-pointers. Sometimes you need someone who is just going to roll to the rim, catch lobs, and protect the rim on the other side of the floor. Making up a team isn't like NBA Fantasy or NBA 2K where you just get the best of the best and it's going to work out. No, a team dynamic is still very different. Okay, last question here. I am going to take for Josh. Josh, what else are you watching in this international window other than Philippines' games?
I will be commentating 10 games. Let me read out the games I've got. You give me 1 second, because I have to start the prep today. You got the time for this?
Absolutely.
Okay, so just loading up the window now. So I start on the first day, Thursday. So that's in 3 days' time. My first game I'll be commentating is North Macedonia versus Lithuania. That's at 5 p.m. my time. My second game that day will be at near 10 p.m. That's Canada versus Dominican Republic. That's day 1. Day 2, I've got Iran versus Kazakhstan. That's 1:30 my time. Then 4 hours later, I've got Slovakia versus Spain. And then that is me done for the day. Day 3, I've got Morocco. I think that's against Cote d'Ivoire. That's the 5th game. And then, Sunday the 24th, start nice and early. Got 5 a.m. I'm commentating Guam versus Japan. And then later I'll be commentating Philippines versus Hong Kong. That's 7 games. But the final game that day, I'll be covering Great Britain versus Greece. And then on the final day of the qualifiers, I've got, just looking, the reverse fixture, Spain versus Slovakia. And I've got the very last game in the window, which is at 1 a.m. I've got... Oh, do I? I thought I had... Oh, no, sorry. That's not the last day. I got it wrong. Apologies, Nav. I got that wrong. I've got last game, Argentina versus Colombia. That's a very final game. That's at 1 a.m. So I have 10 games in 4 days.
Wow. Anyone there that you're particularly excited or intrigued about?
I mean, look, eh, that would be me speaking as a fan, me speaking as someone that does this as a profession or as a form of living to pay bills. Essentially, you put the same effort into every game. I also think it's the sole responsibility of a commentator to be very well prepared for any other game and to push not just. I think the key to commentary is not not speaking on everything that just happens on the court because that's almost insulting the viewer's intelligence. Personifying what's happened, telling stories about players, talking about, you might have, for example, at the FIBA OQT this summer, we found out when the Bahamas played Lebanon, Yusuf Hayat, who plays for Lebanon, was playing against, I can't remember his name, no, Laral's Nen for Bahamas. And then we found out Laral's Nen is actually one of the associate head coaches at Bowling Green State, and Yusuf Hyatt plays for him. So we had a great story in the build-up to that game and throughout the game where I think that was probably the first time in FIBA international history where an NCAA coach was playing against one of his players. So these talking points, for when it comes to Guam versus Japan, I covered the last game when they played at the Ariake Coliseum in Tokyo. I could talk for days on the B League players, what clubs they've played for. Some of the Guam players have also played in the B League. For Gilas, there's so much to talk about in the summer for what this team has achieved. And we can talk about, winning 4 out of the first 5 or 6 FIBA Asia Cups. I mean, there's for me, I love this game. As you can see last night, even though I'm waking up feeding my baby daughter, I'm on my phone watching Game 6, Chicago Bulls versus Utah Jazz, because this is not only a job for me, this is my passion. This is what I'm obsessed with. And, to a lot of Filipino basketball fans, I didn't just get into Gilas basketball after SJ Belengel's 3-point. It may look like that. I think people may think that, I do like interacting with Gilas fans, and some will have opinions about that. But, I go back to 2007, Tokushima, Japan, when my dad went to commentate the FIBA Asia Cup, and I was watching the games from home. That was my first time seeing a smart Gilas team with Jimmy Alapag and Gabe Norwood's first ever time playing for Philippines. And then, obviously, when I was in Taipei that summer in 2013, Dad was in the FIBA Asia Cup commentate. So there's so much I could talk about that whoever's watching, I want them not only to live the experience when they're watching the game, but also to learn something new, of course, So that's, am I looking forward to any game particularly? No, not really. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm looking forward to all of them. It's going to keep me busy for 4 days. So it is what it is,
I never understood the people who wanted to gatekeep being a fan or supporting a team or just appreciating a team. Unfortunately, we live in a time with social media where it's so easy to gatekeep or criticize. Even if people, and I'm talking about people who have criticized you particularly, don't exactly practice what they preach when it comes to professionalism. So you guys try to figure out what that means. But anyway, Josh, appreciate you as always for taking the time to be here to speak with me and to give some context about the Gilas team and international teams to our dedicated basketball viewers. Much appreciated as always. Godspeed always, and looking forward to see you work the FIBA games once again.
And like I said, after the window, if you want to catch up, let me know. Happy to hop on again. And we'll be in Vietnam. The wife and me will be in Vietnam with the baby in March, April time. So, like I said, I'm definitely planning to come out for a few days. I'll get my blessings to take the small trip. We'll link up. And to all those watching, Nav and me are going to work on a little amateur documentary when I'm out there. So stay tuned. Watch this space, okay?
Absolutely. Yes. A documentary is on its way, and I feel like it's something so many people are going to love. I'm very excited. Thank you, Josh, and
Thanks,
talk to
bud.
you soon.
Talk soon. Bye.
Okay, that was Josh Bett, everybody, FIBA broadcaster and a staunch supporter. Maybe not supporter, but an aficionado, like I said, of the Philippine men's national basketball team. Thank you so much, everyone who tuned in. I know we did 2 straight podcasts in as many days, but so much love to those in the community who keep watching, keep commenting, keep sending in their questions. Really appreciate it. More to come. A lot of hoops this week. I'm so excited. And we'll be back on this podcast to unpack all of that. God bless. Take care. Enjoy your Monday. Chill out.